Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Sunday, December 31st. It is New Year's Eve, the last day of football in 2023. It is week 17. We've got a lot to discuss in today's episode. One more week of football left. You got today and the next week, and then it's on to the wild card and playoffs and all that great stuff. So exciting time of year, but as we've been saying the last couple episodes, it's also a little disappointing because regular season's coming to an end, but the playoff races are heating up. And the way the NFL is this year, there is a lot of teams still fighting for spots. There is number one spots up for grabs in each conference. So a lot of meaningful football today and next week. DiMari, thanks as always for joining us. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Thursday and last night we got some pretty good football going. So hopefully this Sunday slate keeps it up. 1:00 games, we got some good ones. Sunday night's gonna be pretty good between the Vikings and the Packers. You know, two teams fighting for a playoff spot. So let's enjoy this second to last week of football, at least meaningful football for this Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of big games on today. You mentioned the Vikings-Packers game, which will be big for the NFC wild card. And then you even got two, top seeds in the AFC, Dolphins and Ravens fighting it out, which we'll get to that here in a little bit. But we'll start with last night's game, because if that is a sign of what's to come this weekend, then we're in for a really good weekend of football, as the Lions fall just short to the Cowboys 20-19. A crazy ending with the whole 2-point conversion situation. There's a lot of highlights to get to. We'll get to them here, but I wanted to start with the ending. From a Cowboy fan perspective, what was your thoughts on it? As just a outsider on it, I thought the call was definitely poor, but then I didn't quite understand the whole situation for Dan Campbell, and I like Dan Campbell a lot. I didn't understand why he went for two again. I would have, after they threw the flag, I would have just went for the extra point and then just made it 20-20 go to overtime rather than going for it again. What was your thoughts on the whole situation? And, how did you view, his thought process? Like, do you agree with them going for two again? All that stuff. Kind of Cowboys coming away with a win, which was much needed, and obviously get to 11-5. What were your thoughts on this crazy sequence?
Yeah, I think he got too aggressive after they threw the flag on the first one. Remember, they had three shots at it. They scored on the first one. The second one, he threw the interception, but Parsons jumped off sides, and then they went for it again. So I think he should have kicked a field goal after the first one. Or I guess I understand the gamble, because then Parsons did jump off sides, so you get 5 yards back. But after that, I probably would just kick the field goal. But I kind of feel Dan Campbell probably had somewhat in his mind, like, the Cowboys offense is hot. Like, they're moving the ball down the field. If they get the ball to start, that's game over. So, he was just going for the win. But I'm not mad at the call. There's a lot of calls kind of that game that was bad on both ends. Jay Ferguson, where we could have iced the game with the nice run from Pollard. Call tripping, completely was not tripping. You can see Aiden Hutchinson sticking leg out. The rest were terrible all night, but it just happened to work in our favor this time around. But other than that play, those last few plays, I think Dan Quinn, a lot of Dan Quinn's play calling last night and situational awareness kind of needs to be questioned, because you let this team go down the field in 1 minute and 45 seconds. That was probably one, even though they didn't win the game, but that's probably one of the best 2-minute offenses I've seen out of any team this year, and our defense just completely stunk it up.
Yeah, definitely. It was interesting to see that, especially for a defense that was so good for so long. It seems like they've hit a little bit of a bump, especially stopping the run. But to your point with the refs, last night just wasn't the first case of, questionable calls throughout the entire game. Again, it was just like a crazy game all around. It's weird that it was only 20-19. If you watch the game, you'd feel like it'd be like 38-35 with all the craziness going on, especially late. But I don't know how the NFL just keeps letting all the refs just get away with all these calls. This crew was the same crew that messed up a couple other calls previously in the season. And I think they're going to actually take them away from the playoffs. But instead of finding, a lot of players and coaches have been fined for complaining about the refs. Like, it's time the refs should start answering questions from the media and, maybe getting fined, because a lot of these calls have just been very, very questionable. And especially last night with a handful of calls on both sides. You mentioned the defense. What do you feel is the biggest issue with the defense right now, allowing Detroit obviously to go down and score? And especially, stopping the run has been a little bit of an issue for them. Last night, they allowed 125 yards on the ground. It wasn't a crazy, crazy domination on the ground, but how do you feel they need to fix this defense moving forward?
It's kind of hard to say because, like you said, they only rushed for 125 yards.
Yeah.
But Gibbs had a few big runs, and then Montgomery had a few big runs, which were negated by penalties. So without a lot of those few big runs, the defense played very well as far as protecting the run, especially from a team that probably runs the ball second to best behind Baltimore. So,
Yeah.
I'm not really too mad with the run defense. DeMarcus Lawrence played great last night. Michael Parsons played great protecting the run. It's just something about that secondary on third down where, third downs, they can't seem to get the stops. They can't seem to get off the field the last few weeks, and they came back to haunt them last week in Miami where Tyreek Hill was just, dicing up the secondary. So I'm not sure what Dan Quinn has going on right now. I don't know if it's lack of depth at the linebacker position or guys just, out of place. But last night, I'm not gonna lie, we got lucky. That's the call that we got lucky with. But come playoff time and you play Detroit again or you go to Philly, San Francisco, that's not gonna cut it. That whole way the defense came out yesterday, not gonna cut it whatsoever.
Do you feel any of it is they're starting to feel the effects of being without Trayvon Diggs, or do you don't think that has an impact with it? Do you feel like some of the secondary stuff might be it's starting to not having Trayvon Diggs is wearing on them at all?
Actually, just a little bit. Watching Ron the last few weeks, you kind of see teams starting to pick on them where they're kind of like, hey, we're not going to throw these curls and these outs at you and those type of things. We're going to throw the ball over top of you since Dallas does like to run a lot of man-to-man. So not taking nothing away from Blaine. He's had a great year and he stepped up, but he's better inside the slot. And right now, they got him playing outside where Trayvon Diggs was at. But along with him, teams kind of figuring him out, I think they're just figuring out the defense as a whole, where it's like with Michael Parsons, for example, hey, if you're going to put him on the line, we're going to run right at him. And with DeRon Bland on the outside, if you're going man-to-man, we're going to throw the ball right at him. Team Dallas is very aggressive. They like to run a lot of stunts up front. So we're going to pull. We're going to do all these different type of things. And teams are kind of just figuring it out because Dan, the first few weeks or majority of the season was just like, I'm not going to run nothing too crazy. We're just going to punch you in the mouth. We're going to be faster than you, more physical than you. We're going to get to the back. And teams kind of now just, taking their time and really digging deep into the playbook, especially later on in the season. And a lot of teams are going to take this and moving forward, kind of see ways to work around that defense. Don't let that defense get amped up and kind of take you out of the game completely.
Yeah, it's definitely will be interesting to see how they approach it. The final game in Week 18 and heading into the postseason. Now, on a more positive note for Dallas, you had the great play from Dak, which I don't know how he was able to evade pressure, throws a 92 yards to CeeDee Lamb. My next question here is like, CeeDee Lamb leads the league right now in receptions, leads the league in yards. And I still feel as if we've talked about a lot, like the Tyreek Hills of the world, the A.J. Browns, are all talked about so much, and CeeDee Lamb, it still feels at times underrated. I mean, maybe only outside of Tyreek Hill, this guy is got to be in the conversation as the all-around best wide receiver in the NFL. What was your thoughts on his performance yesterday, and where do you think he ranks right now in the NFL? Because earlier in the year, we talked about it and said, top 5, top 7, top 4. I think now he's easily 1 or 2.
Yeah, I'm gonna put him up in there in that 1 or 2, definitely top 5.
Yeah.
Some might put a little asterisk next to it because Jefferson has been out, Chase has been out. There's been a few guys, Devontae Adams offense over there, but I mean you can't take away from what he's doing. So I'm gonna kind of go answer the second part of that question first, where if you look at Tyreek Hill and what he's working with, you have a very solid wide receiver 2, Jalen Waddle, who could be a wide receiver 1 probably on any other team. And same with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, where Devontae Smith can be a number 1 receiver on a lot of other teams. And you look at what CeeDee Lamb is doing, and Michael Gallup, who was supposed to be the wide receiver 2, has literally been a non-factor the whole entire year. So for CeeDee Lamb to be putting up these numbers and doing what he's doing as like the only elite target on that team, I know Brandon Cooks has been pretty good too. But he's not, like I say, he's not Jalen Waddle. He's not Devontae Smith. He's not one of those guys. So for CeeDee Lamb, all attention be on him, and teams are coming into these games all week of practice like, hey, 88, wherever he's go, all eyes on 88. That's all we want you to do. A lot of safety help, dropping coverage underneath and try to take him out of the game. There's, knock on wood, as of right now, there's no way to take him out of the game. His level, like he's been up here these last few weeks. He's been insane, and I'm just wondering what those numbers would look like if early on in the season, those few blowout wins where the offense was playing all game. He's been pulled a lot of games, kind of just like Dak. And slow start to the season, and kind of waited until the LA game where it's like, all right, get me the ball. So see what he's doing. I mean, I feel like he could have 2,000 yards right now. He's spectacular.
Yeah, he's been that good. I mean, 227 yards last night on 13 catches. And you mentioned like the Chargers game. That seems like when something clicked, because I think that game was the start of 4 straight games where he had over 100 yards. And since then, he had last night's game, even last week against Miami, he had the touchdown and 118 yards as well. I mean, this is just, he's been so good. He's been so dominant. And that 92-yard play was just crazy. I don't really know what the Lions pass rusher was doing, but for Dak to be able to evade pressure, and we've talked that a little bit about off air and even on air about like Dak and a little bit of his mobility and his pocket presence and his ability to roll out and make some plays. That's definitely something that's improved in his game. And do you feel that is still like an underrated aspect of his game compared to what people see out of some of these other top quarterbacks?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I feel like I say this every week, but watching Hard Knocks and once again watching Miami prep for Dallas, and Mike McDaniel threw out the stat, which I didn't know, but that is, and I looked it up, 100% true. Dak is the highest. He has the highest percentage of third down efficiency when he is out of the pocket and using his legs. Like that is crazy for a guy who's not really considered mobile. When you think Lamar, you think Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen when we talk about mobile. So man, Dak is he's dangerous when he uses his legs, because teams, you still have to respect him running the ball. I mean, he's not the fastest guy, but when Dak is running, we're getting big chunk yards, talking about 12, 14, 18-yard runs. And then it's like, all right, we got to stop that and start to throw the ball over top of you. That play last night, he threw that off his back foot. So to throw that ball like that off his back foot is crazy. That's a very underrated aspect of his game. Like you said, he's continued to show why he should be the MVP when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I agree. He's been great. And last night was another one of those nights that play was, again, just crazy. 345 yards last night, 2 touchdowns, 9.1 yards per completion, which is wild. I mean, I think most Jet quarterbacks, they're averaging about 4 yards to completion, which is just complete difference watching a more than competent offense as opposed to what the Jets were out there. But any other closing thoughts on this game before we get into the other weekend slate? And you got one more against the Commanders on the road, right?
On the road, don't know if they're playing starters, so I guess it's not really a big one. But as far as last night, I feel like those two teams may meet up again in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is going to be a definitely possible playoff matchup. And if that was any sign of things to come for the playoffs, then we're in for a really exciting postseason. So moving on here to this today with a bunch of other games on, a bunch of other big ones. We shift on over now to the AFC with maybe the biggest game of today's, probably the biggest game of today's slate, and that's Miami and Baltimore. Dolphins 11-4, Ravens 12-3. Both teams coming off of big wins, obviously. Dolphins last week, and then obviously Dolphins, I think, last week over Dallas, and in this week, you now get Baltimore coming off the win over the Niners. I'll start with the Baltimore side of it. This is a big opportunity for them because you go on the road, you beat San Francisco on Monday night, and now you have a shorter week coming off the Monday night game. You now face Miami. This is a huge opportunity for them to knock out 2 top teams in less than a week and really make their case. What are you seeing from this Ravens team during this 5-game win streak? And are they for real? Do you think they should be the 1 seed, will be the 1 seed? What is your expectation for Baltimore today and then the rest of the way?
I think they're for real. This is going to sound crazy, and we might just get into it a little later. But as of now, until this game is played, I just don't think they're the most dangerous threat in the AFC, not with how Cleveland's looking. but Baltimore has the opportunity to change my opinion on that. Because again, you go to San Francisco and you bully the bully like Brock Purdy. They had Brock Purdy looking all type of distress, throughout that game. So it's going to be a test to see what they do against Miami. I think with them being home, that kind of gives them the upper hand. And Miami is shorthanded. No Waddle today. Raheem Mostert has just been ruled out. So, but for Baltimore, you still got to go out and play, do your job on Sundays, regardless of who's suiting up. So I think this is a big opportunity for them kind of to show the rest of the AFC, like, hey, we're going to be the 1 seed, and this is why we're going to be the 1 seed. Because, again, they've been impressive. We're looking earlier in the season. I think they started off kind of slow, and we're just like, this is a very disappointing Baltimore team. And they haven't been talked about in the national media as much, but they've completely flipped that thing around. And Lamar's not even playing that great. He's not playing bad. So I don't want to get that mixed up. But, like, how Lamar played, like, 2019, like, that year, he's not even playing close to that. And they got a lot of injuries across the board, especially in that running back room is depleted. I mean, this Raven team needs some respect because they've handled adversity, like, pretty well, and they continue to win. And, again, I think they're going to prove why they're top dog in the AFC right now, or could be top dog in the AFC.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, like you mentioned, without legit running game and even Lamar not maybe quite where he was in 2019, but it's also their receiving core. Like Zay Flowers, I mean, he's solid, but when you look at all these other top teams in the AFC, they all have these really, at least like the top teams, like the Bills have, Stephon Diggs. The Chiefs are an issue, and you've seen them struggle with that. And that's something I think that the Ravens have been able to overcome. Like you look at the Chiefs without receivers, they've had problems, and the Ravens are still 12-3, but Miami with Tyreek Hill, Cleveland with Amari Cooper. I already talked about, Buffalo with Stephon Diggs. Some of those other top teams, I mean, I think that's what makes it even more crazier for Baltimore is that they've done. I mean, Zay Flowers had a good year, but he's not going to eclipse 1,000 yards unless if he has a crazy game. I think he's sitting at 752 right now. So unless if he has a big game today and the next week, he won't eclipse 1,000 yards. And for a number 1 seed to have that and overcome that is huge. Something I'm really looking forward to today is kind of the chess match, though, between Mike McDaniel and Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator of the Ravens, because something that's been really underrated of this Ravens team is their defense. They've been so good. Guys like Kyle Hamilton, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith up front, they've done so many really good things. How do you see today kind of that chess match between those two coaches and a really good Ravens defense hoping to contain Miami's speed that has bitten so many teams this year?
I think Miami is going to struggle today. I'm not going to lie. I feel like the Ravens are going to throw a bunch of different things at them. And like I just touched on with Waddle being hurt and Mostert being hurt, you're losing 2 of the fastest guys on your football team. And that's why I have to change the way, he's play calling, because A-Chain is going to be the lead back, I believe, and Jeff Wilson backing him up, which are still, fast guys, and they're still athletic guys who can do things out the backfield, but they're not Raheem Mostert. I mean, we're talking about the guy who just set the record in Dolphins franchise history. So it's going to be hard for Miami to adjust, especially with how physical that Ravens defense is. And like you said, they got some studs on that defense. And something about them playing at home, that defense is on a different level. So I feel like Mike McDaniel is going to have to go deep in the bag today and basically just try to help Tua out, try to keep him sane, keep him calm, and let the game come to them. I feel like they try to go out there and force, with 2 of their weapons being out, it's going to be a long game, kind of how Baltimore did Detroit, not too long ago. I feel like Miami could get one of those situations if they try to go out there and force it, make Tua play hero ball.
Yeah, it'll definitely be. It's gonna be interesting. If I think, what was it, last year or 2 years ago, was that crazy Miami Baltimore game where, yeah. I mean, I don't think we'll be in for one of those, but if we are, I mean, I'm all for it. But, this is just for Miami. It's gonna be interesting to see, without their pieces, how they respond, and off of a big win too last week, like their first time beating a team above 500 since the 1900s. It feels. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond on the road. And then next week, you've got a big game against the Bills. So I'll ask you your game pick here. I'm assuming you're going to take Baltimore here. What's your official pick? And then does Miami still win the AFC East if they can't find a way to come out on top today?
I am taking Baltimore at home. Again, the injuries for Miami, key injuries, and they just won't have enough. But as far as the AFC East, it's tough to say because they really needed that one last week, like absolutely. But I just see Buffalo losing today. I believe they played New England. There's nothing that makes me pick New England in that game. So again, like you said, Miami coming off kind of this high of last week, and now you have to go down to Baltimore. How do you handle that? And if you do lose today, how do you prepare going into next week? Is there a different focus? Are you mentally ready for that? Knowing this division a few weeks ago, it was ours to lose. Now, if you're going to be in a spot to where you are going to lose it, that's kind of some added pressure. But for next week, looking ahead a little bit, Buffalo does have to go to Miami, and that's not an easy task to ask for. But I don't got Miami today, but I don't see them losing the division either. I think even if they lose today, they go handle business next week.
Yeah, it's definitely something to watch for. I'll take Baltimore as well. Miami's injuries plus being on the road is not a good recipe for them. I'm also rooting for Baltimore because I'm all for the possible Sunday night football game next week between the Bills and the Dolphins for first place in AFC East. I think that would be super, super exciting for that game to mean a lot more than just, possibly a wild card spot or Buffalo fighting for a spot. But Buffalo's also got to take care of business. I mean, I don't see them losing to New England at home, but again, they did lose New England earlier in the season with Mac Jones, and New England seems to have found something with Bailey Zappi, but Buffalo at home, and if they lose to New England, they don't deserve to win the division anyway. So I'll take Baltimore as well today at home. Their defense is just so good, and there's the injuries is tough for Miami. So Baltimore by a decent margin. Now, moving on here to the other games this afternoon, we'll stay here in the AFC. This is a really interesting game. On paper, earlier in the season, you look at this game and you say this could be a potential AFC Championship preview at Arrowhead between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes once again. And here we are. It's two teams just not anywhere where we thought they would be earlier in the season. You have the Ravens obviously losing Burrow. They got crushed last week against Mason Rudolph and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then you've got a Chiefs team who have all this outside noise, and they're not winning. They've got receiver problems all over the place. This is just a really interesting game. Just what is your general overview before we take it team by team here of this game? It's almost like two teams. I don't know if you want to call them desperate, but a Bengals team coming off a brutal loss against the Steelers and a Chiefs team losing games the way they've done, receiving core being a disaster, losing at home against the Raiders is just not what a championship caliber team does. Do you feel these two teams, it's kind of just like two desperate teams coming into this one?
Yeah, I'm going to absolutely say desperate because, like you just said, before the season started, you circle this game and you're like, all right, we get it again. Burrow versus Mahomes, and it's probably going to be a shootout. We're talking about two of the best quarterbacks in all the NFL, and now we're watching Jake Browning and then a bunch of Kansas City receivers that can't catch a cold. So they're dead. I know if I pick, I'll probably say Cincinnati's more desperate, considering that they are still fighting for that playoff spot. But for Kansas City, I mean, this is about to be the first time in forever where you've had to play a road playoff game. And technically, division's not all the way clinched for them. Two things things could go wrong in these last 2 weeks. It's kind of slim, but both of these teams are kind of desperate. Kansas City, again, it's like, hey, let's try to get some offensive momentum flowing for these last 2 weeks and going into the playoffs. Because right now, I'm sorry, but I'm counting out not Mahomes, but that team. They are a first-round exit because their weapons. They just don't have enough weapons. And for Cincinnati, you want to be playing in the postseason. So both of these teams, they definitely need to win today.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned the division still being up for grabs. I mean, it's probably not going to happen, but I'm all for the chaos, as I've always said. If Kansas City loses today and then the Raiders win, you have next week being – it's going to be interesting because you have the Chiefs play the Chargers next week, and in the the Raiders will play the Broncos next week. Raiders get the Colts today. Chiefs obviously get the Bengals. It's not crazy to think that the Raiders could beat the Colts and then the Chiefs would lose to the Bengals today. It's not, I guess, crazy to think that, but I don't see Kansas City losing to Easton Stick and the Chargers. But I guess anything's possible. What do you feel like? Do you feel there's anything Kansas City can do to try and help this receiving core? I mean, I know at times, Rashee Rice has made some plays. But again, there's just been so many drops, so many miscommunications. It just seems like they're off. And I don't know if that's something you can really adjust at this time. Like, this is the worst time of year to be off with your receivers going into the playoffs. Do you feel this is just they're gonna have to force feed it to Kelsey and hope guys start catching balls? Is there anything that they can adjust to fix this issue with the receiving core? Because to me, it seems like right now they've tried a lot of different things. Like, hope's starting to run out.
Yeah, you got to just ride hot hand. Like I said, Rashee Rice has been pretty good, pretty solid the last few weeks. So you kind of circle him in like that wide receiver one of like, hey, you're the guy, we're coming to you. And then you let others feed off of that momentum and feed off of defenses not really focusing on them so much and taking their attention to Rice and Kelsey, and then giving these guys these opportunities, with one-on-one coverage and beating these zones and all these type of things. And right now, Mahomes and just that offense in general, Chiefs fans, everyone in Kansas City, you can't rely on these receivers to take over a game. And Rice is not on that level yet, but like he has been the most consistent. And it seems as the offense does flow a little better when they're getting him more involved. And I'm not going to necessarily say putting Kelsey second, but just not queuing the offense on Kelsey or nothing. Where it's like, let's spread the ball between these two and hopefully get some other guys rolling. But outside of those two, there's, like you just said, there's no hope. They need to go receiver heavy in this draft and free agency because this team just, they're ridiculous. I'm sorry, but without Mahomes, if they did not have Mahomes, this might be like a four or 5 win team. It's crazy to say like how he elevates that team like that. But yeah, without him, we're basically watching East Stick and the Chargers.
No, yeah, you're totally right. If they didn't have Mahomes, they probably would be a 4 or 5 win team. And it's crazy to think. I mean, I think their backup is Blaine Gabbert. If you just plug Blaine Gabbert in there, I mean, if you plugged anybody but Mahomes in, no quarterback outside of Mahomes would be able to win 9 games with that receiving core.
Yeah.
It's brutal. So they're gonna have to do a lot in the offseason. No matter, they're not winning a Super Bowl this year. I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if they even win a playoff game. I mean, again, nothing against the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, I think they've got a bright future and they're doing good things over there. But losing at home to the Raiders in December, really? Like, that's terrible. So moving on to the Bengals side of things, it's interesting with the backup quarterbacks. And I thought that maybe at some point, like Joe Flacco's bump in the road would come, but he completely toasted the Jets defense on Thursday, which I can't say I'm surprised. You saw like Josh Dobbs, his run come to an end. Browning, I don't know if it's that same path where he kind of hit a wall like Josh Dobbs did last week. Do you feel that was just a 1 week thing on the road, got crushed? Mason Rudolph was hot and Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, they were ready to go? Or do you feel that was maybe just a bump in the road? Do you feel this may be like the reality setting in for Cincinnati after that one loss? What are your thoughts on like the Bengals and where they stand after that Pittsburgh game?
First, I'm gonna say I probably jinxed it because I think just last week we said there's no backup playing better than Jake Browning right now.
Jake Browning,
out and plays like that. But last week was just a little bit of both. Mike Tomlin, we watched Mike Tomlin coach for years. We know how he prepares for games. So I'm kind of not surprised that they went out and completely shut out Cincinnati like that. Like, that defense is still very good. I know they're not as great as they were to start the year, but still a very good defense. And to prep for a backup quarterback in the division, like a division game that you need, of course, Pittsburgh was licking their fingers coming into this game. But for Browning, I think he can bounce back today. It's going to be kind of hard in Arrowhead, but I just don't think that was a reflection of how he's been, since he's kind of stepped into that starter role for Burrows. I think today he kind of picks up where he was before the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah, we'll see if another JB can go into Arrowhead and pick up a win here. Yeah, like you said, I agree. Like I could totally understand Tomlin's team after losing 3 straight. He wasn't going to lose 4 straight, especially final home game of the year for them. You knew he was going to have that team ready to roll because they got to go out on the road to Seattle and Baltimore, which is brutal. We'll get to that game here in a second. What's your pick for this one?
All right, this is a tough one.
Yeah.
Again, we just talked about those receivers and those weapons, but I don't see Kansas City losing at home today.
Yeah, I want to really say the Bengals. I'm rooting for the Bengals because I would love to see the chaos in the AFC West. Like, imagine the Raiders win the division over not that the Chiefs would lose to Easton Stick, but I'm going to take the Chiefs too. I don't know. They're going to turn it around. I think they're too good. Like, I know their receiving core is an issue, but Mahomes is not going to lose back-to-back games to Aiden O'Connell and Jake Browning at home. I just don't see that happening. So I'll take Kansas City in this one. Moving on here to our final big preview here of the weekend before we get into some other news and notes around the NFL. That's the Steelers and the Seahawks. We just talked a little bit about the Steelers. Was that win last week the Mason Rudolph magic? Who knew? Maybe he's the future in Pittsburgh. What were your takeaways from that win? Do you feel that is the start of anything for Pittsburgh as they head on to the road in a hostile Seattle environment?
Not at all. I feel like it was a fluky win. Not a fluky win, but you're just not gonna get that out of Pittsburgh
Yeah.
every week. I mean, like that was George Pickens' legacy game. He had a
Yeah.
great game. I'm glad they finally got him involved. Like it only took the whole
He's
entire
so good.
season,
They don't,
but
yeah.
yeah, they use him so incorrect. Just trade him to Dallas at this point if you're not going to use him right. But yeah, I mean Pickens. I don't know if he's going to have as a big of a game as he had last week. You don't often see that unless how we're talking earlier, like the top of the top of the receivers. And I just don't think he has a huge game how he does last week.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in Mason Rudolph and the Steelers offense right now. And I don't think they have enough. Again, with their weapons, and it's not even their weapons are bad. It's just they don't get them involved and they don't ride the hot hand as they should. So I just don't see Pittsburgh continuing that this week. I hate to say it.
Yeah, I tend to agree here too. I think, look, if this game was at home and they were facing I don't know, maybe the Titans or somebody like that at home, let's say, I'd say, yeah, they'll pick up a win. They'll get to 9 wins and they'll continue to make things interesting in the AFC. But going on the road in Seattle with Mason Rudolph, after Seattle has picked up 2 big wins, the one against Philly and then last week against Tennessee on the road, Seattle's still a team fighting for a wild card spot. I just think this is kind of they're in a way they're running into a hornet's nest here. And again, it's Mason Rudolph. He had a big game, but I don't think you're going to get a terrible game from. Like, I think just the Bengals last week, they just played so terrible all around. And I don't think you're going to get that from Seattle. So I tend to agree there. What is your thoughts on Seattle here? I mean, they dealt with obviously the quarterback issue or the quarterback injury with Locke coming in and now Geno back. Do you see them sneaking into a playoff spot? I think they're what where are they right now? I think in the NFC I think they're the 7, right? They have the last spot, I
Yeah,
believe.
I think they're sitting at 7, but they still got some room to slip. But
Yeah.
I think they get in. Like you said, those 2 wins the last few weeks have been huge. None bigger than Philly.
Yeah.
And Tennessee, obviously, that's the game they expected to win, but they needed that win. They went out and they got that win. So I just feel like with them these last 2 weeks, kind of know everything that's at stake. Like I say, you get Pittsburgh at home today. They play a lot better at home, and they just need the game. They have no room for error. I believe everyone's healthy as far as their weapons on the offense. So I think they go out and they handle their business today.
Yeah, 5-2 at home this season. They've had a lot of success at home. Again, their last home game came against Philly, which was a big one on Monday night. So what's your pick for this one and who you got coming away with the win?
I'm going to take Seattle with this one. Like I said, I think they go handle business today with everything kind of up in the air for them. Don't want to miss out on their last playoff spot, giving the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going to take Seattle as well. If this was again, like if Pittsburgh was playing Tennessee, I'd like their chances more, but Seattle fighting for a playoff spot, coming off a high too, it could be a little bit of a letdown for Pittsburgh. So I'll take Seattle in this one at home. Now we'll get into a couple other things here. We didn't get to it at the top, but I want to get to it now. The Russell Wilson situation, which we get to here quickly before we look at some of the other standings and some of the things that are still up for grabs in the AFC and NFC. It's a very perplexing, situation. You hear the reports first come out about they talked to him at the bye week after they beat Kansas City and when they were on that big winning streak and all that good stuff. And now it was due to his contract, which I understand, but I don't know why they would go to him in the middle of the year when they were finding ways to win. What are your thoughts on the whole situation? It's such a perplexing, weird situation in Denver, and Jarrett Stidham will get an opportunity to start today and next week as well.
I just don't understand it. You're fighting for a playoff spot.
Yep.
Like I said, you the beginning of the year where I'm going to Miami game where you watch that Broncos team and you're just like, move the Broncos to the Pac-12. They don't deserve to be in the NFL. And then like they start to pick it up and they start to win some games and like beat some good teams. You beat Buffalo.
They were
you beat Kansas
on the road
City.
too. Yeah.
On the road, like you go beat some teams, and obviously we don't know the full situation, but to go up to Russell Wilson in his locker and kind of tap him on his shoulder and like, you're not starting next week. That is ridiculous. I don't know what's going on with this contract and everything, but I think I was watching First Take or Get Up yesterday, and it was something about they don't want him to get hurt. So that is a part of the reason why they're going to bench him. But I mean, if you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt regardless. Whether that's in practice, whether that's in the game, or whether you're like John Wall and you get hurt at home, like you're going to get hurt. So, I feel like it's just wrong for a quarterback that has completely looked so different than how he did last season. And now they're winning games, and you kind of just sit him for Jarrett Stidham with everything that's kind of still up for grabs. No, they need to get him out of there, like ASAP. Get Russell Wilson out of there.
Yeah, I agree. He needs to. For himself, he needs a better situation. Like, I don't know. Look, I've said this from the day they got Russell Wilson. I didn't think it was going to work out. I saw a lot of issues with Russell, just his game towards the end of his career, and at the beginning of this season. Like last year, it was a disaster. A lot of that was Nathaniel Hackett, and we're seeing Hackett's true colors come out this year with the Jets, unfortunately. But like, I'm all on Russell Wilson's side on this one because I thought that a lot of I thought he's just not the same quarterback he once was, but he hasn't had a bad year. I mean, throwing 26 touchdowns, that's tied for sixth in the NFL. He's got over 3,000 yards. He's put together a nice season, and a team that I know they've lost 2 straight, and last week losing to New England at home is very tough pill to swallow, but you're still 7-8. You could still win these next 2 games. I mean, the Chargers at home and then the Raiders, those are winnable games. Like, you can win those games, get to 9-8, and possibly get in. And then once you get in, you never know what happens. I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl, but, as they say, just get to the dance. You never know. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen before. So I don't understand this move. And especially to come up to him during a bye week after they beat Kansas City for the first time in forever. I don't get that. If they lost that game to Green Bay and they lost to Kansas City and they went into their bye week 1-7 and they're like, dude, we're going to bench you. That's one thing. They won 2 straight. They got to 3-5, and you got to give Russell Wilson a ton of credit because that didn't affect his game. Like after that, he went on the road, beat Buffalo, beat Minnesota, beat Cleveland, who now is unbeatable. Nobody can stop them. They got to 6-5. They ended up losing to Houston. They were able to beat the Chargers. They were 7-6 going into Detroit and New England. Now they're 7-8, unfortunately. But I don't know. I don't get the move at all. And it's just a very interesting situation in Denver as to where they go now, because with Russell Wilson's contract, they're going to be in salary cap prison with this. So, like, what is like the thought process you think for Denver? Like, I'll bring up a guy, and this might sound crazy, but Zach Wilson might not be the dumbest thing for Denver. And I will say this. His contract is very small. Like, if they can get him for a cheap contract or get him for a cheap deal, 5th round pick, let's say, from the Jets, they're going to have to tear down this roster. Sean Payton's going to blow up this roster. He's going to tear it down He's going to be in charge. He's going to get all the pieces. So if they can bring in Zach next year for 2024 and then have him play it out, it's a low risk, high reward. If he turns out to be the guy that the number 2 overall pick was, great. If he doesn't, it doesn't matter because you're just tanking 2024. You're not going to have much talent on the team anyway. You win 3-4 games, you get a pick in 2025, you can easily move on from Zach. That could be like your bridge quarterback option. Like, what is your thoughts on that? I don't know.
First, I didn't know where
you
were going with that.
But like, if they wanted a tank, he'd be the leader of the tank because he's tanked for 3 years with the Jets.
But yeah, now that you bring it up, I can see it. Like, it makes sense before you first started. There's literally no way. But I'm gonna approach it from both angles. For Zach Wilson, I mean, you go to Denver, you literally have no expectations whatsoever compared to, why you're over here in New York. And I mean, Zach Wilson has done some bad, a lot of bad, but he's also done some good. So I mean, it's not like you're absolutely just getting a bum at the quarterback position. Obviously there's still some room for improvement for him, but looking at now the Denver side of it, now looking at kind of the list, who else do you go grab? I mean, you're not going to be high enough unless you trade up and you just start trading players away and, like you said, break roster down. So unless you're willing to like ship off Courtland Sutton and Pat Surtain, I know they had like Judy on the trading block. Like, a lot of these top name guys are going to have to go for you to be able to trade up in the draft or even just trade for a quarterback. But no quarterback is going in there in the trade, especially with the amount of money they're on Russell Wilson. So I guess if I do, you'll get Zach Wilson for basically nothing because you have nothing to pay anyways. Yeah. And if you're going to tank, hey, you just go ahead and tank. Maybe, like I said, you might get the Zach Wilson that the Jets were expecting to get, and he might go and he might do some great things. And if he doesn't, then like you just said, hey, thank you for your help. We're done with you. And then you get a quarterback in next year's draft. I know it's kind of brutal to say that, but they're just not building around him to be the franchise. So, it won't hurt for Denver because you're going to need a quarterback next year unless you're going to rely on Jarrett Stidham to be the guy. Denver, I don't know. They need somebody.
See, and that's why I think like it'd be like a high risk or a low risk, high reward because Zach Wilson, I think, he's probably got more upside than Jarrett Stidham. But that's the thing. Like, best case scenario, Zach goes out there, he balls out, you win 9 games, and he kind of plays with that mindset like he played in that Houston game where it's just like, roll out. I'm not going to, he's going to have no pressure on him because he's going to have no expectations. Like you said, he's going to Denver. They're going to have nobody on that. There's going to be nobody on that roster. They might have to move on from Sutton and Surtain and guys like that. Like some of their big contracts, the expiring contracts, they'll move on from. They're going to have to, completely blow it up and restart. So for Zach, it's just like, I'm in Denver, no expectations. I'm not in New York. Let me just go out here. Let me rip it. Let me throw it. Best case, he shows you something. He plays well. Maybe he's your guy. Worst case, not even a worst case. You win 3-4 games. You move on from him. It's a cheap contract and you can get a top 3, top 4 pick in the 2025 draft. I think it could be a possibility. I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, they might just roll out Stidham out there, but it might be, I don't know. I mean, you got to see how these 2 games go. I mean, maybe Stidham lights it up these next 2 games. And, but yeah, I mean, this is a fireable offense from up top to just say this, like tell Russell Wilson during a win streak. It's like telling any quarterback during a win streak, hey, we're going to trade you. No, like you focus on that in the offseason. And like you said, injuries can happen at any moment. So, and it's just, it's a perplexing.
Again, that's the point. That's the point I'm not understanding. So they're winning games and watching NFL Sunday Countdown this morning before we hopped on. So I did see between weeks 13 and 16, I think he has a total QBR, talking about Russ, of like 38. So it's like, all right, I get it. He hasn't played that well like the last few weeks, but if you're sitting at maybe 5 or 4 wins, and I think you said it, if you're sitting at like 5 or 4 wins and you're kind of just like, all right, let's go into a new direction because it's just not working out. But you're sitting at this spot where it's like, we are still in the mix of the playoffs. And yeah, we're losing, but Kansas City continues to lose, and the Chargers are losing, even though the Chargers are dead last. Like, it sounds crazy, but the only team they should kind of be worried about, I guess, is the Raiders.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving the Raiders like all the respect they deserve, because they look great the last few weeks, but that's not a team where like at this point where you're kind of concerned about as far as keeping you out of the playoffs. So you got a few games left, you're in the playoff mix, and again, by week, you're telling me you go to your quarterback literally in the locker room and you're just like, hey, thanks for those big wins over DC, but we're going with the guy next to you. Like, it literally makes no sense. Is one of the dumbest things I've probably ever heard. And again, quarterback, like, if he's playing as bad as the stats and statistics are showing, I get it a little bit, but at the end of the day, like, wins are a team stat. So you can't just pinpoint the quarterback and just, kind of make him the scapegoat for everything that's going wrong, when there's a lot of things in Denver. We can go on about it and it will take hours, but just starting with the receivers to begin with, the defense, they gotten better, but the defense is not what they were supposed to be. It's just a lot of things going on in Denver. They found their scapegoat, and I can say it, but Sean Payton, like, as a coach, he's been a problem. And he's been suspended before, to the point that they had to suspend him. Like, he's an issue, but to each his own, and that's what Denver and LA and whoever the leadership in the organization wants to do. But I just think it's a bad call.
Yeah, I agree. And Payton's kind of entering that dangerous territory that Belichick has already entered, where we're going to start having that conversation of what really is he without Drew Brees? Like, would he have ever been successful without Brees? Because now you go to Denver, you had a 7-6 record. Like, you were right there. And now you're 7-8. You bench your quarterback, which doesn't make sense. You told him he's going to be benched during a win streak. Now next year, you're basically just throwing the white flag already, because you're not going to find a quarterback. You're not going to be able to go out there and make a win now move with where your salary cap's going to be with the whole contract. Yeah. So you're going to have a bridge quarterback, again, whether that's a Zach or they just stick with Stidham, or I don't know, somebody, a backup like a Brissett or somebody maybe comes in and plays the year for them. They're going to have a bridge quarterback, which at best a bridge quarterback gives you 9 wins. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's not. But then you're 2025, you're going to be looking at a pick. So he's basically throwing next year away. And in 2025, get a good pick, build the roster up again. So the Broncos with this move, I feel like, have just set themselves 3 years backwards, because even if you get a quarterback, you're going to have to develop them. Year one might be rough. You might be looking way down the future, 2026, until the next time you can be competitive, because they're going to have to tear this whole thing down. So maybe it works, but I think if you're a Bronco fan, you got to be frustrated. I don't think you can have much trust in Sean Payton to turn this thing around.
Here's my question. Even if they do the bridge quarterback option, 9 wins is a lot. Like, 9 wins gets you into the playoffs now.
That's the top. That's the best,
So with that bridge quarterback, and just say 9 wins, which I just don't see any quarterback coming in there with that situation and winning 9 games. Are we even guaranteed Sean Payton will be there for 2025, like going into that season? Because I mean, they're looking at like the rap sheet of it, where you kind of like, again, like you just said, you're 7-6 and you completely just stink it up and you lay an egg for the last few games. And then the following year, you come out and just say you only win 4 or 5 games and like you just look terrible. I just don't see, if that situation happens, I don't see a way where he continues to be the head coach of that team. I feel like they're going to move forward from him, because I mean, he hasn't shown anything where he's worth keeping.
Yeah, I could see that. I just think they might be giving him the keys in a way and saying like, hey, you've got 3 years to turn this thing around. This is all you. I mean, this is a fireable offense in my eyes for everybody. GM,
absolutely,
coach, everybody. You're basically quitting. It's hard to wrap your head around. You're basically giving up on a season that you were in the playoff conversation. Like that just doesn't make sense. And he was like, Payton was brought in as like a win now move too, because he was supposed to be brought in, set a new culture, get Russell Wilson back to the guy he was just a couple years ago, and go out there, not even fight for playoffs, but get to the playoffs, win 10, 11 games and do all that. Like they weren't winning 10, 11 games, but they were at least going to get to the playoffs. And again, who knows what happens after that? I mean, it's a disaster. It's all really, I guess that could be said in Denver. And, here we go again, post Peyton Manning quarterback controversy. They haven't been able to find the guy. I mean, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Drew Lock. Now Jarrett Stidham went through that conversation of guys that have played Joe Flacco. There's a lot of them. Zach Wilson might enter that conversation next year. Calling it right now. Zach Wilson, not a bad option for Denver. Part of it's a Jet fan. I'm just trying to get something for him. So I'm going to make the case that we can get a 5th round pick for him, which is probably too much, but who knows?
Sounds like you already, Sam LaGuardia sent him off to Denver. That's where it seems like you're at right now with Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Just move on. Already ready. Send him to Denver.
Just get him to Denver now, and then just wait till like March. So then he can get used to the surroundings, buy a house, get ready, buy a big mansion for a year. Russell Wilson could just give him his mansion. So he could go there and win 4 games, and then they can tank, and they'll remember him for getting the next great quarterback.
In college, where these like school players, these top recruits come out of college, come out of high school, and just say like you commit to Ohio State and you just early enroll and you do like bowl game prep. That's like what you want from Zach Wilson. Like, hey, just get him there these last few weeks, get him used to the system, and get him comfortable, all the gear he needs, teach him how to ski, whatever you need to do, keep him in Denver.
Yeah, he's teach him how to ski. Yeah, get him out there. Now the question is what if he got hurt skiing? Then that would be a whole different situation. He got hurt skiing.
At this rate, they don't honor contracts anyway, so I mean they can easily get out of it. I guess
they could get out of it
with Russell Wilson. So I'm not surprised what Denver could possibly pull off if a situation like that happens.
I will say though, like for Zach though, if he actually does go to Denver, I mean it's kind of helpful because he is close to Utah. Like that was one of the biggest concerns with him coming to New York was how he would do away from home in a big market like Denver, small market. Utah, it's close to there. Skiing, it's all good. It's all good. Denver with Zach is going to win 11 games next year. They're going to make the playoffs. Forget Mahomes. There's a new king in the AFC West.
Maybe the Denver Nuggets, but there's no way
that is true.
Zach Wilson goes to Denver and wins 7 games.
Zach Wilson.
I just don't see it happening.
Zach Wilson will be a bigger celebrity in that town than Nikola Jokic.
I just kidding. There's going to be a lot that has to possibly go wrong in the world for Zach Wilson to go to Denver, and I don't know.
There would have to be like, you don't want to see any of this. Mahomes would have to get hurt. Like you'd have to have so many quarterbacks get hurt, and like Blaine Gabbert play for the Chiefs with that receiving core in order for Zach to have success. And then you'd have to hope Raiders don't do anything at quarterback. The Chargers will be bad. Like, oh, jeez. Yeah, either way. It would be wild. Either way, to close things out here, you look at the top or you look at the standings right now. What are some things that maybe like surprise you and some things that possibly could change here over the next 2 games? I guess we could start AFC wise. Like, how do you see the bottom of it playing out? I mean, Cleveland's been great. Joe Flacco's unstoppable. How do you see the bottom of the AFC playing out? Because we've obviously discussed already today the top of the AFC. But what do you see like teams like Indy, Pittsburgh still lurking, Cincy, Buffalo is 6 speed right now. We'll see where they can go depending on what Miami does and all that stuff. So what do you see like the AFC bottom of it specifically playing out?
Cleveland, I believe, locked up the 5th seed.
Yep.
After that, I'm probably going to go Indy, and I'm going to go Buffalo, even with loss next week. If they do lose next week, I feel Buffalo gets in, just considering, the teams in front of them. Pittsburgh, kind of got a few rough games here. And for the Colts, actually, I want to get on something before we even go to start with Buffalo. A few weeks ago, Jags ended up 8-3.
Jags, yeah.
And, nothing could possibly go wrong for the Jags. It was, hey, let's win 2 or 3 more games. We win the division. Now we're talking about the Jags, the Colts, and the Texans, who I believe are getting C.J. Stroud back today, are all sitting at 8-6. Am I correct?
Yep.
The Jags might lose that division. I know they play the Panthers today, and you're just like, there's no way they lose to the Panthers. But watching them last week against Green Bay, it's literally any given Sunday. Josh Dobbs beat the Cowboys in like week 3, I believe. So anything is possible in the NFL. But I feel like that is one team that we are not talking about enough. Where before the season, I predicted to maybe win 11, 12, maybe 13 games. I knew the schedule was rough, but now I'm talking about a team who, again, you were just 8-3, and now you are on the last legs, and you might not even win your division. And if they lose even one of these two, they might not even get into the playoffs. Jacksonville, it's a question mark. It's a question mark with them right now.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we're talking about that right now, but yeah, you make a great point. And if they lose this week, then technically next week Houston and Indy's for the division. That game's huge. It'd just be a huge disaster for Jacksonville if they would to collapse like this. Now, they do have Carolina. They've looked terrible, but if they lose to Carolina, they don't deserve to go anywhere. You lose to Carolina at home too. But yeah, it's weird because the first 2 losses against the Bengals and the Browns, like, they were close games. They lost by 3 against Cincy, and I think they lost by 4 against the Browns. But losing to the Ravens, they got crushed. They didn't even show up. And then losing to the Bucks by 18 last week, that might have been the worst of them all. So it's like they've hit rock bottom. They're at rock bottom. What happens next? What happens now? A lot of it's coaching. A lot of it's going to be coaching. Absolutely. As to where they are. But again, you're going to get CJ Beathard this weekend because I think Trevor's out. So that makes things a lot more interesting for them against Carolina. Even with Beathard, do they win that game? But it's a disaster for them. Who do you think ends up winning that division? I still think Houston's going to get in somehow. I still think they have to with CJ Stroud. He's too good not to be in the playoffs this year, I feel.
I want to take Houston. I'm just not too sure about the health with as far as the weapons. If Nico Collins is back, I'm taking Houston to win the division.
Tank Dell hurts.
Tank Dell hurt. I'm sorry, Tank tried to win a championship for you, but negative. But if Nico Collins is playing and he's healthy, Houston is going to win that division. And if they do, I'm gonna kind of get off a little bit. If they do, DeMeco Ryans should be a high priority and consideration for Coach of the Year. Completely took a team that was not supposed to win 5 games and just won the division, and you got him in the playoffs.
Yeah,
but I think Houston will end up winning the division somehow. And I guess if we're going to kind of go along finishing out, that 5 through 7, give me Cleveland at 5. Yep. I'll probably say, actually, maybe Jacksonville and the Colts both get in. Like maybe all 3 of them get in. If they're all sitting at 9-8, 8-9, and Pittsburgh kind of loses a few games here, and depending on what Buffalo does, both of them teams might possibly get in. But that's 6 to 7. It's kind of hard to really pinpoint because everything is just so close right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cleveland and Buffalo definitely get in easily. So then it'd just be the 6-7 spot that probably gets in. I think it's probably going to be, I'd go Houston. I think Houston gets in at 4 because they win the division. 7's tough. Since he's still there, obviously Pittsburgh, those are your 8 and 7 teams. Because then Indy would have to win this week. They'd have to finish 9-8 if Houston wins. And then the Jackson would have to lose out. It's kind of tough, I feel like, I don't know how many, because Jacksonville, I don't know who has the tiebreaker. I think Jacksonville might have the tiebreaker over Indy. I think they do, because then they swept Indy.
I think
so that puts Indy in a tough spot. That means Indy, you feel, almost has to win out, because if Indy loses one of the next 2 and if they finish 9-8 and Jacksonville finishes 9-8, Jacksonville's in. So that's what's kind of tough. But Houston, like if they win their next 2 and Jacksonville just loses their next one, Jacksonville's got a little bit of a benefit here because their schedule is, they They get Carolina, which is winnable, and Tennessee, even as bad as they're playing, it's 2 teams that have combined for 7 wins this year. So like you should be able to beat those teams, which is why I think probably Jacksonville give the upper hand, but I don't know. It's tough. That 7 spot's so questionable. And even again, like Cincy, a team like that could still come through and make it. So it's deep. Now you move to the NFC. Tampa Bay is just amazing. I mean, the story with Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles, what a story that's been. It looks like they're on their way to winning the NFC South, which seems like a division for a while there that nobody wanted to win. They've still got 2 games here against the Saints. Today is a big one. I believe if they beat the Saints today, I think they can clinch because they'll be 9-7, and that means they'll sweep the season series against the Saints. And I think that'll mean that they clinch the division because then they'll be 9-7. I believe so. So I think I don't know if Atlanta is still, I don't know. Either way, but it looks like they're on their way. So they'll probably be the 4. Now you move on to the bottom of the NFC, and it's similarly crazy to the AFC, where you have a lot of 7, 8, and 7 teams vying for these final spots. We've already mentioned Seattle. I think the Rams are in a really good spot. I think the Rams will fit in at 6. What happens you feel at 7? Because obviously 5, Dallas currently sits at 5, but Philly could move to 5. Whoever wins the NFC East, that could obviously change. I think the only 2 teams that can get to 5 is either Dallas or Philly because the Lions already clinched their division. So how do you see like the 5, 6, 7 playing out for the NFC? Because it's interesting as well.
5, I think Dallas is going to sit at 5. Last week kind of hurt them losing to Miami's, and I just don't see Philly. They might almost like Tyrod Taylor last week. I just don't see Philly losing to Arizona today, considering like Marquise Brown isn't playing, just everything going on over there. They could possibly lose next week though, but I think Dallas is going to come in at 5. I love the take on the Rams at 6. I mean, this is a team where beginning of the year you kind of just like, is Sean McVay washed? Like, is it time? Like, as one of the greatest play callers kind of done, no Cooper Kupp for a while, and they just emerged like, out of nowhere, and they're a dangerous team come playoff time. As far as 7, I'm going to stick Seattle in that 7 spot. I think they're going to make it. Again, kind of looking at that division earlier on, like it was literally San Fran and then everybody else, and you're just like, there's no way even 2 teams from that division get in. Now we're talking about possibly 3, but I believe, if I'm correct, Minnesota and Green Bay kind of lurk behind Seattle. I don't see it happening, considering that Minnesota just played Detroit and you get Detroit again. Last game of the season. Not too sure Green Bay schedule, but after last week, I know they kind of pulled off the win against Carolina, but I don't know. They're kind of concerning. Like Carolina has looked terrible all year, and you almost go in there and lose. But again, any given Sunday. So I'm definitely going to go with Seattle at 7, LA at 6, Dallas at 5.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. I think I kind of see it shaping out the same way. And with the Rams too, something I think is impressive is Les Snead. His ability to find 3rd and 4th round talent and has been so crucial, especially on the offense side of the ball, like guys like Cooper Kupp, guys like Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams as well, who's had a huge year at running back. A lot of guys that they've kind of found like hidden gems in a way, late rounds that have really helped them, especially now. And it's crazy to think we could be in line possibly for a Lions-Rams game with Matthew Stafford playing a home playoff game in Detroit, which would just be crazy because all those years he never played a home playoff game in Detroit. So that is intriguing. I'm all for that. I think that'd be really cool. But I think Seattle too. I mean, look, you look at Minnesota's quarterback situation, it's a mess. Atlanta, Green Bay, if they beat the Vikings today and the Seahawks maybe lose to Steelers, then it could get interesting. But that's why I think what makes today so important for Seattle is they got to get this win over Pittsburgh. You can't lose this game, get to 8-8, have these other teams win. I know you got Arizona next week, which is helpful, but like Seattle, everything's right in front of them. All they got to do is beat Pittsburgh at home and then beat Arizona. Like, you should be able to do that. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be in the playoffs. So I'll go
He'll
Seattle there
deserve
at
to be
7.
in if he can't pull it out.
Yeah, no doubt, definitely. So any other closing thoughts here as we close things out? We're a little over 40 minutes, a little under 40 minutes away from the 1 o'clock starting.
Just enjoy this second to last week of football. That's kind of it, a lot of these teams still got a lot to play for. So I'm kind of glad we're kind of at this point of the season. Usually the last 2 weeks, it's really meaningless. Like it doesn't even matter. And you're kind of just watching because it's on TV. But, we got some really good games on today. Next week, a lot of playoff implication games. So let's enjoy it all we can as it's all over.
Yeah. It's depressing a little bit, but exciting at the same time because of the playoffs. But enjoy it. Definitely second to last full day of football. So a lot of great games today, starting with the 1 o'clocks, going to the 4 o'clocks, and even 8 o'clock game, Sunday night game tonight, at least on the East Coast, 8 o'clock. But Sunday night game tonight between the Vikings and the Packers. Although the playoff hopes are slim, they still got playoff aspirations and an impact on the line there. So stay tuned. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. Enjoy week 17, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.